You're listening to the Mind Over Murder podcast.
My name is Bill Thomas. I'm a writer, consulting producer, and now podcaster. I am now trying to use my experience as the brother of a murder victim to help other victims of violent crime. I'm working on a book on the unsolved Colonial Parkway murders, and I'm the co-administrator of the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook group together with Kristin Dilley.
My name is Kristin Dilley. I'm a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a victims advocate, as well as the social media manager and co-administrator for the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page with my partner in crime, Bill Thomas.
Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristin Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
Welcome to another episode of Mind Over Murder, and we are starting with a big announcement. Bill Thomas, where will you be in 1 week?
In 1 week, I will be in Austin, Texas at CrimeCon. Let's see. You and I have been twice before, and this is my third time. Sadly, you will not be with me this time.
Yeah, I can't. I have to work. I have children to educate, minds to expand. Yeah, I really, really wish I could go, but unfortunately, education calls.
Well, as I understand it, your students are in exams, and you're supposed to be there coaching them on to great success.
Sure, we'll go with that.
You sound somewhat cynical. That's not like you.
Well, it's been a really, really long year.
It has that. So
it has been a long year.
We don't have all of the details about CrimeCon. We can tell you what we know.
Yes.
Now, I'm heading to Texas on Friday, June 4th. Mm-hmm. My first time on an airplane in well over a year because COVID and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And as a matter of fact, I haven't really traveled very much like a lot of Americans.
No, you haven't. You've stayed home.
Yeah, for the most part. Interesting to be on a plane. We'll be at CrimeCon Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And our panel, which is on the Colonial Parkway Murders and the Lovers Lane Murders television series on Oxygen, is going to happen, I think it's 12:45 p.m. on Sunday. And it'll be David Carabinus, who's one of the executive producers of the show, Lonnie Coombs, who's one of the stars of the show, and myself, talking about the Colonial Parkway murders, how the show came together, how the series was developed. Lonnie's going to be talking about how she learned about the case, and David's going to talk about the logistics of putting together a 4-part true crime series. I'll try to give people a little bit of the backstory about how the show, the idea of the show came up, and some of the work that went into writing and developing the show. It should be really interesting.
So if you did watch Lovers Lane Murders and you loved it, which we know you did because it was awesome, then do tune in to Bill's panel because you'll get the inside scoop that people who aren't at CrimeCon won't get.
We'll keep everyone posted as things unfold. We'll have more detail, a final name for the panel, but I know it has something to do with the Colonial Parkway murders and Lovers Lane murders and all that kind of stuff.
And so even though I can't attend in person, I am attending virtually. And what that means is in between all of the examining and the grading and the everything else, I'm going to attend as many panels as I can because I do have a virtual pass. And so anything interesting that I do come across, I will post on our social media feeds, Mind Over Murder and Colonial Parkway Murders. And I'll take some pictures of Bill through the screen and post some pictures of Bill.
I'll wave.
Even though I will not be able to be there physically, I will definitely participate virtually, and I will keep everybody up to date on all of the happenings and the cool panels and all sorts of great stuff. They've got some wonderful guests lined up, and I'm very excited. And if you are still interested in attending CrimeCon, and why wouldn't you be? It's a wonderful experience. There are still tickets available, so check it out. And if you're interested in attending CrimeCon virtually, you will have a magnificent time. We have enjoyed CrimeCon for the 2 years that we've gone. I'm sure you're going to have a blast this year, Bill. So do consider picking up some tickets for CrimeCon. They are available.
That sounds great. And it's a nice alternative to bringing yourself all the way to Austin, Texas.
And you can join us next year in person when we go to Vegas, baby. for CrimeCon next year.
Somehow you sound more excited about Las Vegas than I am.
I've never been to Las Vegas, so I'm really looking forward to it.
No wonder you're so excited about it.
Yeah, right? I want to go to the hotel that has all the roller coasters on it.
Okay. I've been to Vegas a number of times. I've had to go for work. Note the use of the expression "have to."
Oh, jeez.
Well, I don't want to be a downer,
right?
You know, I should say it's going to be great. We love CrimeCon, which is true, and they're wonderful people, which is also true. And we've had great experiences in our previous visits with CrimeCon. So yes, you're going to love it, and they have big hotels with roller coasters and stuff.
Yes, and you're going to ride them with me.
Okay. I've never been in the lobby of the one that has the roller coasters in it, so we'll go check that out. Do we know the name of the one with the roller coasters? I'm sure
I think it's New York, New York.
Okay. All right.
I think it's New York, New
All
York.
right, we'll
There's definitely one with a roller coaster off the side of the building, though, so that's going to be fun.
Well, you know me. I'm all about the live music thing, so I like the live music thing, and actually, you know, real people that I'd actually want to see
all right.
perform in Vegas pretty regularly. I'm more of a rock and roll guy than Wayne Newton or somebody like that.
So we're not going to go see Celine Dion.
Yeah, I was. You remember when I mentioned Wayne Newton? I was going to mention Celine Dion as someone that I wouldn't go to see.
Oh, okay.
I acknowledge she has a beautiful voice. It's just not really my thing.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Austin, Texas, on the other hand, is the live music capital of the world and has lots of great music. You go on to 6th Street. I don't know what it's going to be like now post-COVID here, but it's normally pretty fun and entertaining to be in Austin, Texas.
Very cool.
In other true crime news, we often talk about what is up with our friends at Othram Labs and all of the cases they've been breaking. Our friend Cece Moore and her team at Parabon just had a major breakthrough. I thought this was a really interesting case. Cece Moore and her team just identified a guy who was killed in 1991, they think. His body was found in 1992 in Sand Canyon, Nevada. And he was referred to for many years until very recently as Sand Canyon John Doe. His real name now, as a result of Cece and her team's work, working with the deputy sheriffs there, is Vincent Marion Trapp, T-R-A-P-P. The Lyon County, Nevada Sheriff's Department has been working on this case for all of these years. They believe he was murdered in 1991. The body was found March 12th, 1992. They've had a terrible time identifying this man. At this point now, they have a name, and the way this worked out is that they had contacted Cece and the people at Parabon in July 2020, and their major crimes division had asked them to work on identifying him. And they narrowed it down using forensic genealogy. Just recently announced that the victim was a 43-year-old man, Vincent Trapp, originally from Sacramento, California. And actually, I think this is one of those cases where this may now move them forward again, because as we've talked about with other cases with unidentified murder victims, it's so difficult to pursue a murder investigation when you don't even know who the victim is. Now, this guy is extremely distinctive. So even though it's been 29 years since he passed, he's 6'6" tall.
Wow.
And has red hair and blue eyes. So he's a guy who's really going to stand out. And he had moved from Sacramento, California to Nevada a couple of years before his death. So I'm hoping that if they're able to get out there, and they've got photographs of what Mr. Trapp looked like at the time of his death, and then pictures of him as a younger man when he was in the military. It looks like he was in the Army from this photograph. Here's a guy who would really stand out in a crowd, I think, because of his physical stature and the red hair and the blue eyes. And I'm thinking, gee, you don't see too many people standing on every corner that are 6'6".
Right.
So great job by Cece Moore and the team. And I'm very optimistic that they'll be able to move this case forward. And it's very clear that the Lyons County, Nevada Sheriff's Office is very serious about this case. So it's always great to see these cases move forward.
Absolutely. And so our next episode is going to be with fan favorite and favorite of ours as well, Supervisory Special Agent James R. Fitzgerald. Fitz certainly earned the title of retired, although he stays fairly busy, and he is going to talk to us about his new project, The Fitz Files, and give us some final thoughts on the Unabomb case before he hangs up the Unabomber mantle for good and moves on to other cases of importance to him. So that will be next time on Mind Over Murder. We hope you'll join us for that.
It's a fantastic conversation. It should be a terrific episode, and Fitz is always entertaining and lots of fun. And Kristin, I would imagine you feel the same way. I learn a lot of stuff just from talking to Fitz about how the FBI works, how profiling works, how he helped to develop the science of linguistic profiling. We always have a fascinating conversation.
Absolutely. We love talking to Fitz. And by special request, we have been asked to share the contents of the Ron Little letter. And so today we are going to put on our drama hat. Some of us are more dramatic than others. And we are going to share with you the contents of the Ron Little letter. We are also going to take listener questions, of which there have been many. Mm-hmm. This seems to have been a bit of a bombshell for our listeners.
Yeah. Some people didn't know about Ron Little or Liberty Security and its potential links to the Colonial Parkway murders. A lot of folks have never seen the letter. We will put up the letter itself in the show notes for this episode. Kristin's going to read the letter, and then I'll provide color commentary.
Mm-hmm. So, I will put on my drama hat. I've been practicing all day, she said facetiously. Yeah, we will provide you, because it is such a long letter and because it is so light on paragraphing, there will be times when we'll stop and just offer some commentary. I'll try to make it not in the middle of a sentence. This is much more of I think we called it a diatribe last time rather than a letter.
Well, you used a word which I really like and don't hear often enough. I think you used the word screed.
Yes, it's definitely that too. So we'll go ahead and start by letting you all know the number of people, the vast number of people to whom Ron Little actually sent this letter. There is a I don't suppose you'd call it a top sheet because it's at the end of the letter, but there is a page that says copies of this letter are being sent to, and that it includes a numbered list of 14 recipients of this massive letter. In numerical order, Ron Little sent this letter to Oprah, Sally Jesse Raphael, 2020, 60 Minutes, West 57th Street. I'm not sure what's there. Bill, you lived in New York. Do you know what's at West 57th Street?
It's where CBS studios are located. We've actually been there to shoot television series about the Colonial Parkway murders. I went to those studios with Joyce Call and other family members a couple of years ago when we did a television show about the Parkway case. So,
so West 57th Street.
West 57th Street is a now canceled CBS television show, if I'm not mistaken. It was a news program, sort of like 60 Minutes or one of those.
Oh, okay. Number 6 was A Current Affair, The Washington Post, WVEC TV 13, Norfolk, Virginia, Wavy TV 10, Norfolk, Virginia, and WTKR TV 3, Norfolk, Virginia. It was also sent to local Congressman Herb Bateman, Senator Paul Tribble, the New Zealand Embassy, and President George Bush.
And although the letter is undated, it was sent in late summer 1989, is my recollection, shortly before Ron Little was deported back to New Zealand.
All right, let's go ahead and jump right in. We've got 7 pages worth of letter to get through here, so Let's see how we do. We'll go ahead and start. Let me introduce myself. I am Ronald Little. In February 1985, I came to America from New Zealand. Since 1987, I have been harassed and treated abusively by the Immigration and Naturalization Service, the FBI, and ATF. At this time, although I have committed no crimes, I have had my New Zealand passport confiscated. My permit to work has been revoked, so I am not allowed to work or collect unemployment, and the INS will not allow me to return to New Zealand. My family has been threatened by government agencies. Would you please take a few minutes to read my story? Maybe you could help me or lead me to someone or some agency that can assist me. Thank you for your time and any assistance you render. Sincerely, Ronald Little. So this is a cover letter that accompanies the real letter. Any thoughts on that, Bill?
He starts off, I think, this is kind of a cry for help, and he's claiming to be harassed by these three agencies, INS, FBI, and ATF. Although, interestingly, ATF is mentioned in the cover note only, but as you'll discover as we go through the letter, the ATF, I don't think ever shows up again. It's just that one time.
No, it is just the one time. Page 1 of the letter. On February 20th, 1985, I excitedly boarded a jumbo jet in Auckland, New Zealand. My life's dream was about to come true. I was going to the United States of America, a country where dreams are made and anybody has a chance to make something of their lives, even those who made mistakes in their younger years. The trip took 21 hours, all of which I was awake. How could I sleep? My heart was pounding and my face strained with a smile from ear to ear, my eyes wide and shining bright, full of wonderment of what was to come in this foreign land of Mickey Mouse, John Wayne, and Jacqueline Bisset, my teenage fantasy. A place where buildings rose up into the clouds and roads were 8 lanes across. A far cry from a country where sheep outnumber people 30-1. A country where America is a picture on television or a big screen at the movies, where everyone is a millionaire or a movie star. A place where people join together against all odds and make a difference. A place in a child's dream. He's putting it on a little thick there.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Here we are. I know there aren't really paragraphs, but man, he's laying it on thick.
Yeah, these are some extensive sentences too. Little did I know on that day that my life would be shattered. My dreams turned to nightmares, my hopes of a good life, a second chance wrenched from my grip. This golden country of fairness and opportunity turned into an arena where aliens are kept like animals in cages, where rights cease to exist and you become playthings, where a government agency is the same as a Gestapo unit, where rules don't exist for them, or if they do, no one has the courage to enforce them. An agency that entraps, tricks, threatens defenseless women and children into obeying their demands just so they may say, "Oh, how good we are." This agency is known as the INS, the Department of Immigration and Naturalization Services. Scary, huh? You better believe it, because they have no rules or regulations enforced upon them, just like the Nazi secret police. They just do what they want because no one will stand up to them. Why do I make these claims, you may well ask? Well, read on, my friends, and become educated. It's a fast and hard course, but I promise you will retain what you learn for life. Yep. Sorry, I had to take a breath there for a minute.
Please continue.
Before I go on, I want to say that I don't hate America or Americans. I just can't believe that in a country of freedom and democracy, an agency, especially a government agency, can act this way and no one will do anything about it. We condemn the Nazi Gestapo, yet we condone its tactics here in the USA in our government agencies. Again, I feel like he's laying it on a little thick.
Yeah. I'm not a huge fan of the INS, but oof. There's a solid layer of something being laid down here.
Okay, so that's the end of a first large block of text. Like we have said, there are no paragraphs, and as this goes on, it continues to even lack spacing, but that is one large block. So now I'm going to move into my second large block. Now, let's get to the root of this problem. Upon my arrival in the USA, I lived with my fiancé in Tracy, California. We were married on April 20th, 1985. This marriage did not work out, and my wife left me. I was suddenly alone in a strange country, not having any family or close friends. But I kept going. I moved to Gloucester, Virginia in February 1986. I went to TNCC, that's Thomas Nelson Community College, for anybody who's not familiar with the area, to obtain my state registration as a security officer and then as a private investigator. I was placed on the academic merit list at TNCC, getting the highest possible scores in both fields. I worked as a security officer for Liberty Security Services, Inc. After just 6 short months, I was promoted to lieutenant, then 3 months after this to captain. Then 5 months later, I owned the company. I changed the name to Advanced Security and Investigations.
Let me add a couple of things here.
Yeah.
Here's where I think BS ends and flat out lies begin, because Little is not mentioning the fact that he does reference making mistakes as a younger man. But as we understand it, he's actually a convicted felon in New Zealand. And he was, I believe, not honest in his application to come here to the United States, because had he admitted that he was a convicted felon, he would not have been permitted entry into the United States. Further, when he registered in the Virginia state registration process for work as a security officer and private investigator, again, they would have asked him questions about whether or not he'd been convicted of a crime, which, as we understand it, he had. It would appear that he was not forthright about the fact that he had a criminal background in his native New Zealand, and he's more than glossing over those points.
You're listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll be right back after these messages.
One of the most frequent questions we're asked here at Mind Over Murder is, how can I help?
Thanks to Othram, a leading forensic DNA testing lab for law enforcement, you can get involved and help solve real cases.
If you have tested at a consumer genetics company, you can contribute your data to DNAsolves.com. The process is easy and confidential. Just 2 simple steps. Your DNA might be the missing piece that helps solve the identity of an unknown person.
Then Mind Over Murder will highlight cases Othram is working on to seek your crowdfunding support for DNA testing to help solve these cold cases.
Upload your DNA profile to DNAsolves.com. It's easy, free, and confidential.
Then join Mind Over Murder as we help families find answers with Othram and DNAsolves.com.
Welcome back to Mind Over Murder.
I'm interested in the fact that he has given himself titles of lieutenant and then captain. Is that typically something that one sees in a private security agency?
I'm not an expert on all things private security, but we have received new information in the last few months from people that were intimately involved in Liberty Security and the operations thereof, who have said that the supposed sale of Liberty Security from the man that had established the company, John Knight Hawthorne, whom we mentioned last week, to Ron Little, may have actually been a straw man purchase. In other words, it appears that they were having some financial difficulty that had something to do with, it almost sounds like a workers' comp claim or something like that. Someone had gotten injured on the job, and they were finding their insurance costs had increased tremendously, according to our sources. The decision to sell, and I'm putting quotes around that, the company from John Hawthorne to Ron Little appears to be one of those kind of on-paper only sales. John Knight Hawthorne actually continued to co-own the company and be a silent partner, with Ron Little then being put out front as the new owner. And I think the decision to rename the company Liberty Security and then have a new owner, and then it's called Advanced Security. We even have a copy of Ron Little's original business card from this time frame. We think that's an attempt to get out from under financial obligations under the Liberty Security name, and that's why the company was changed. So again, I think Little may be glossing over what really happened.
This next section of text is very long, and it does get into all of the particulars of his associations with people who were either victims in the Colonial Parkway murders or were victims in Colonial Parkway murders adjacent cases. So this is Ron Little actually sort of laying out the case against himself by himself. I hired a secretary/receptionist named Lori Ann Powell. On December 4th, 1987, a friend and former workmate of mine, Brian Pettinger, went missing from a dance studio in Hampton, Virginia. Seeing as he was a friend, I got involved in trying to find Brian. Well, on February 2nd, 1988, Brian's body was found in the James River, wrists and ankles bound by rope. He had been murdered. To this day, it is not known why. During this investigation of Brian's disappearance, I discovered that Robin M. Edwards, aged 14 years, was found shot to death, along with David L. Knobling, aged 20. They were also found in the James River in Isle of Wight County. This happened in September 1987. It turned out that Robin's mother had worked for Liberty Security also, as did Brian Pettinger and, of course, myself. Then early on the morning of March 9th, my secretary, Lori Ann Powell, aged 18 years, disappears. I also got involved in trying to find Lori. Lori's body was found in the James River on April 2nd, 1988, apparently stabbed to death. On April 9th, 1988, Keith Call, aged 20 years, and Cassandra Haley, aged 19 years, disappeared on the Colonial Parkway in York County. Keith Call's pickup truck was found with both his and Cassandra's clothing on the seat of the vehicle. They have not been found to this day.
He makes a mistake regarding what kind of vehicle Keith Call was driving, but let's keep going and see how he lays this out.
He also spells Keith's name wrong. I'd just like to note that.
Yeah.
I am, by this time, fully involved in investigating what is going on. I made a statement to the press that if Lori turned up dead in the James River, that I would be convinced that all these disappearances and murders were linked. Well, she did turn up dead, and in the James. Now my statement was turned around. Now I knew exactly where she would turn up, so how could I possibly know this unless I was somehow involved? This led to local deputies, state police, and FBI asking me questions. The fear in local people from Gloucester now led to my business being impossible to operate because people suddenly feared and hated me. Why? Because I was the odd one out, the new guy, the foreigner that no one knew anything about. I became a scapegoat, seeing nothing else turned up in the way of leads or arrests. I went to work for Ames, which is a department store. Then the publicity got so bad that people refused to work with me, so I had to be transferred to another store in another area. Well, in March 1988, the INS and the FBI came to my job in Newport News, Virginia, to question me. I was arrested by INS for being an illegal alien, but was released immediately and told to report to the INS office in Norfolk, Virginia, the following Monday. This happened on a Friday afternoon. The INS agent searched my briefcase and confiscated my New Zealand passport and my 9mm Smith & Wesson Model 469. They, being FBI, then asked if they could look through my car. I said yes. I have nothing to hide. Well, they did this right outside my job. They confiscated some undeveloped rolls of film belonging to me, some of my wife's jewelry, along with samples of human hair from the seats, floor, and a blanket in the back of the car. They took a pair of gloves of mine also. They did not give me a receipt for any items they took, and to this day, nothing has been returned to me. In fact, when I asked for it, I was told by Wolfinger, headman for FBI in Norfolk, that he did not know where it was, so I would have to wait until they contacted me for its return.
Again, we're not, by the way, ever implying that Little is involved in any of these murders. he inserts himself over and over and over again. And, we've spoken to Brian Pettinger's widow, and she clearly indicated that he came to her family, he volunteered his services and said that he would help figure out who had killed Brian Pettinger. We've spoken with Lori Ann Powell's family recently, and her parents indicated he did the same thing. Later on, as he was supposedly reporting back to Brian Pettinger's widow, he behaved in a grossly inappropriate manner towards her. He was actually hitting on her while he is supposedly assisting her family in finding her husband, who was missing for days at this point. I think this is his version of consoling the widow or what have you. He complains about the fact that people look at him suspiciously, but he keeps putting himself in the middle of these murder investigations, which is why he ends up on everyone's radar. I understand from an FBI, local law enforcement perspective, Virginia State Police, and even INS, why people were looking at him with such suspicion, because he put himself right there in the middle of it.
Well, and as Fitz said in our last episode, this is something that some serial killers will do. Mm-hmm. They will insert themselves into the investigation to get their rocks off or have their jollies or whatever it is. So yeah, I can definitely understand why the FBI would kind of look at him and go, "What's up with you, dude?" I get it.
He's also skipped over something again. Remember, the letter starts off with him having a very brief marriage in California. In this letter, he references his wife. Mm-hmm. This is now wife number 3, who was 18 years old at the time they were married, and I believe he was 32. He references this latest wife without indicating when that relationship began. Mm-hmm. And, just his wife's jewelry, I think, is how it comes up. And he complains about things that it appears were confiscated by the FBI. He may actually have some legitimate complaints mixed in here, but he always seems to be skipping over key details. Mm-hmm. And with this pattern of constantly inserting himself into the middle of these murder investigations, he ends up attracting the wrong kind of attention.
We are now on page 4 of the letter. Again, no paragraphs, no indentations.
It just goes on.
It just goes on. And if there are times when I pause or stumble, it's because I'm having a little bit of a hard time without some of the punctuation that needs to be here.
Yes.
My wife and I reported to INS as requested that following Monday morning. My wife filled out a petition for me to become a permanent resident, seeing as since I was divorced from my first wife, my first petition was now void. After doing the necessary paperwork with INS, they told me that the FBI wanted me up on the next floor. My wife and I went up to see what they wanted. When we got there, they said that they wanted to fingerprint me. I asked why. They said it was just routine. I said, okay. This they proceeded to do. They took my whole palm print, fingertips, in between my fingers, the sides. Then came the strangest request of all. They asked me to remove my clothing so that they could photograph my tattoos on my body. I asked why, and they replied again that it was routine. I then said, no, it's not routine. In fact, I have never heard of this before. So I said that I would not remove my clothing, but I would verbally tell them what tattoos I had. They again requested that I remove my clothing. I said, go to hell. They settled for me telling them verbally. I then talked to an attorney friend of mine who said that he also had never heard of such a request. I then put it together. They wanted the photographs of my body and tattoos so that they could identify my body should I turn up dead, as they do not have dental records and such. I'm not sure what to make of that, Bill. Do you?
I think this is a real stretch. I actually think they really did want him to show them all of the identifying marks on his body. But I don't think this was about them planning on him being dead at any point in the near future.
Yeah,
it's just ridiculous.
That smacks of paranoia to me. During this period, my marriage was put through an irreparable amount of tension and damage, which led to us separating after our son was born August 10th, 1988. I was afraid at how people would treat my wife and baby, or that they would get hurt should people try to hurt me, which was the talk on the street at the time. Again, I'm not sure if I believe that, Bill.
He has a tendency to really lay things on thick.
Many people I knew and never had problems with suddenly turned away when I approached, or people made or yelled threatening gestures to me in passing. Yes, I feared for my life and that of my family. In fact, I wore a bulletproof vest whenever I left the house, just in case.
Pardon me.
I'm rolling my eyes.
Yeah, I'm rolling my eyes too. I think people can hear it right through the podcast.
Probably. Well, on May 10th, 1989, I was again arrested by INS. For what? Well, so far, I'm not 100% sure. I have been told that it was because I no longer lived with my wife and son, but we all know that this is not a crime. Then I was told it was because my wife had withdrawn her petition, but this they forced her to do by going to her residence at 6:30 a.m. on Monday, May 10th, 1989, and telling her that if she did not sign a paper for them, she would be arrested and be put in jail, possibly for 5 years, because our marriage was a sham. They also told her to sign another form stating that I was dangerous to society and that she feared for her life from me. This she refused to sign. They then came to my job to arrest me. This happened at 8:45 a.m. on May 10th, 1989. I'm kind of surprised he remembers those times because I can't remember what I'm doing from 1 minute to the next.
He has a pretty good command of detail. It's just that, as I've pointed out several times now, there are lots of key things that he will leave out because they are not beneficial to his story.
They threw me up against my car, patted me down, handcuffed me, proceeded to search my car, ignoring my request to see a search warrant. They then pushed me into the back seat of their car, and we left the Ames parking lot. We drove to Richmond, where they picked up another illegal alien from the jail there. Then they left both of us sitting in the car in 80 to 85 degree heat for about 1.5 hours. I had on a leather jacket, which I could not remove because I was handcuffed, and I was sweating profusely. I was in the back of that car like that for about I can't tell what he's doing here, 5 and 1.
I think he means 5 1/2.
5 and 1.5 hours. Okay, that was a little weird. I was then taken to Rappahannock Security Center in Fredericksburg, Virginia, an INS holding institution. We arrived there at around 2:30 p.m. We were booked in and given prison blues. I had $170 cash on me when they booked me in. After being held for 1 week without knowing what I was charged with, I wrote to the superintendent advising him that as of that day, I was on a hunger strike and would remain so until my embassy talked to me. My eyes are rolling again. Are yours?
Well, he's got a flair for drama.
After 4 days of not eating, I was taken to top security. They said it was so they could keep an eye on me and my condition. When this happened, I also stopped taking any fluids and began dehydrating rapidly. My hunger strike lasted 10 days, 6 of which I had no fluids. I lost 28 pounds in those 10 days. I began drinking again only because I was informed that I had a bond reduction hearing the next morning in Arlington, Virginia, so I drank grapefruit juice to restore the potassium to my body. My bond was set at $5,000 cash by INS Norfolk on my arrest. At Arlington, it was reduced to $1,000 by the immigration judge, and I was out of jail that evening. But the jail informed me that they had forgotten to write me a check for the money they had of mine, now balancing $143.70, after spending some of the original $170 on canteen items like shampoo and conditioner, writing materials, and such. So I would have to leave without any money, but at least I had someone picking me up, so I should be okay to get home. I wonder what would have happened if I didn't have someone to pick me up. That was May 26, 1989. It is now June 7th, and my money has still not been returned to me. Why? I do not know. My permit to work has been revoked, so I am not allowed to work. I cannot collect unemployment because INS revoked my work permit, so I am ineligible for employment. To hire an attorney to defend me will cost $10,000 to $15,000, as quoted to me by 2 different attorneys. I can't work. I can't pay them. I also can't pay child support for my son, nor can I support myself legally. So what can I do? I can't leave the country to go back to New Zealand. I was in the process of doing that, and that is why INS arrested me. My embassy telephoned me on May 9th to tell me that they had my passport and that I could pick it up at any time. I decided to get it the next day, but I was arrested before I had the chance. I would have left the USA on or about May 28th, 1989, bound for New Zealand. I was told by INS that if I left voluntarily, I could come back, and they were not going to let this happen. They were going to deport me so that I could never return. They lied to my embassy and anybody else they spoke to. Well, that's my story, and I don't know if you'll even read it, but if you do, and you're at this part of it, all I have to say is if you have any ideas whatsoever as to what I can do, please let me know. I have given up begging for help. I am even at the point where nothing else can surprise me, but I have one thing in my favor, and that is I did investigate the murders, and I happen to know a lot of things, including the fact that someone needs to ask a certain government agent a few questions as to what he was doing while these people were vanishing and showing up dead. Any idea who he might be referencing there, Bill?
I'm not sure. You sure wish that he'd been a bit more specific in this regard, because if he's accusing a government agent of being involved in the Colonial Parkway murders, that's one thing. Or perhaps is he saying that this government agent has failed to follow up in terms of appropriate investigation of these murders and disappearances? He's not very clear.
I actually had to stop right in the middle of that line, so let me go again with that. I did investigate the murders. I happen to know a lot of things, including the fact that someone needs to ask a certain government agent a few questions as to what he was doing while these people were vanishing and showing up dead, and why a lot of questions have not yet been answered, or why no arrests have been made in any of these or other related cases, and how come he's always around or involved in these cases. That's a run-on sentence, Ron. Shame on you. I believe this certain agent may be involved in this whole mess, but if I say anything, I die. And now I have no other choice because my life is ruined anyway, and I believe the only reason I am alive today is because I had so much press attention and that I have shut up until now. I need someone to listen to my story, someone who cares, and someone who can make a difference. I have written to Paul Tribble to no avail. I have written to Herb Bateman to no avail. But I have never, until now, got it all down on paper. I know that this is America, and it's a good country, and I still believe someone can make a difference if I could only find that someone. On June 8th, 1989, the check from the jail for the $143.71 owed to me arrived in the mail. I spoke to my attorney today, June 9th, 1989. He informed me that he had spoken with INS agent, it looks like Soker, who had told me that INS, along with ATF, were intent on charging me with felony firearms violations, a total of 12 charges, 6 different guns and their bullets, each charge holding a 5-year jail sentence and or a $10,000 fine, or both. They've been trying to do this now for 1.5 years. They even offered me a deal that if I left the USA, they would not pursue these charges. They do not want me out of this country. Sokor also said that it was normal practice to set the deportation hearing date immediately after the bond reduction hearing. But in this case, it was overlooked. A mistake. I ask, why is it that everything that can go wrong does? Every mistake that is made on my case because it's on purpose to lengthen my stay in this country in the hope that they may find something else on me. Ronald Little. If you are sincerely interested only, you may contact me at, and I'm not going to read the number.
There's some things about this that I think don't make sense because Little claims that the INS, the ATF, he drops the FBI, at least in the last paragraph, that they are trying to keep him in the country. If anything, from a family member's perspective, I actually think it would have been better had the federal authorities kept Little in the United States. Unfortunately, in August 1989, they deported him back to his native New Zealand, which I see as an unfortunate decision. I guess there's a possibility that there was a lack of coordination between INS, ATF, and FBI, and the Immigration and Naturalization Service went ahead and deported Little, which is unfortunate from my perspective because it does sound like he had information and possibly could have been involved in some of these murders and disappearances. Certainly, as we discussed, he inserted himself in these cases in a very disturbing way. Now, as we mentioned last week, we have new information that Ron Little may have possibly made his way back into the United States via Canada. That in and of itself is a very interesting possibility. But he does seem to insert himself in these murder and disappearance cases in a very interesting way.
Absolutely, he does. That's going to conclude today's discussion about Ron Little and Liberty Securities, but we will continue this discussion in a later episode. Thank you so much for listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll see you next time.
Mind Over Murder is a production of Absolute Zero and Another Dog Productions.
Our executive producers are Bill Thomas and Kristin Dilley.
Our logo art is by Pamela Arnois.
Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod.
Mind Over Murder is distributed in partnership with Crawlspace Media.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
You can also follow our page on the Colonial Parkway Murders on Facebook.
And finally, you can follow Bill Thomas on Twitter at BillThomas56.
Thank you for listening to Mind Over Murder.